Echoes of Dynasties, an epic of ancient Southeast Asia. Introduction, Dawn on the Rivers and Straits. Historian's narration. Greetings, esteemed listeners, and welcome to Echoes of Dynasties, where we will embark on a journey back in time, returning to the dawn of civilizations in the land of Southeast Asia. When we think of ancient history, our minds often turn to the majestic pyramids of Egypt, the philosophical temples of Greece, or the expansion of the Roman Empire. But right here, on the lands and seas we call home, a historical stage no less brilliant and tragic once unfolded. This was not a cultural basin situated between the two giants of India and China. This was the crossroads of the monsoons, the intersection of the maritime Silk Roads, a place where great religions converged and radiated, and the cradle of powerful empires that rose from fertile deltas and strategic straits. Throughout this podcast series, we will examine the past through a prism of 5 core aspects: war, the conflicts that shaped borders and destinies; politics, the institutions and ideologies that forged power; economy, the sources that created prosperity; culture, the spiritual values that defined identity; and finally, legacy, the immortal imprints that the past has left on the present. The main characters in our epic will be names both familiar and mysterious. Funan, the first trading empire buried by the sands of time; Srivijaya, the master of the straits with its mighty merchant fleet; Angkor, the empire of god-kings reigning from great temple mountains; Dai Viet, the nation embodying the indomitable will of the sacred dragon rising from Tang Long; Kampa, the kingdom of crimson brick towers by the sea; and Majapahit, Hit, the last great Hindu-Buddhist empire of the archipelago. It is important to recognize from the outset that these kingdoms did not appear and disappear sequentially. They coexisted, interacted, traded, conflicted, and influenced each other in an incredibly complex and vibrant historical tapestry. Point 1. To help you better visualize this panoramic picture, let's look at the region's timeline. From the 1st to the 7th centuries, the mainland was dominated by Funan, which declined in the 7th century, giving way to Chenla. On the coast, the precursor to Kampa, Lam AP, was prominent. This period was marked by international trade at OCEO and the rise of Chenla. From the 7th to the 10th centuries, Chenla evolved into the Angkor Empire, founded in 802. In the maritime and coastal regions, Srivijaya reached its zenith alongside Kampa. Key events include Srivijaya's control over the Strait of Malacca and the birth of the Devaraja institution in Angkor. The 10th to 13th centuries saw the Angkor Empire at its peak, and Dai Viet flourishing under the Lytran dynasties. Srivijaya began to decline, while Kampa remained a significant power. This era is famous for the construction of Angkor Wat, Dai Viet's resistance against the Song and Mongol Yuan invasions, and the Chola raids on Srivijaya. From the 13th to the 15th centuries, Angkor declined and fell in 1431, while Dai Viet continued under the Tran-Holu dynasties. The maritime world saw the rise of Majapahit to its peak, while Kampa weakened. This period is characterized by the rise of Majapahit, the fall of Vijaya, Kampa, and the collapse of Angkor. This timeline is not just a list of events. It is a map that helps us break free from linear thinking, from the idea that one kingdom ended before another began. It reveals a much more dynamic reality. In the 12th century, as King Suryavarman II was mobilizing enormous resources to build Angkor Wat, to the north, the Lai dynasty of Dai Viet was also in a period of brilliant development. And to the south, the maritime empire of Srivijaya had begun to weaken after foreign attacks. This picture reveals the periods when kingdoms were most likely to conflict or trade, such as the centuries-long rivalry between Angkor and Kampa, or between Dai Viet and Kampa. This is the frame of reference, the foundation upon which we can position and deeply understand the story of each kingdom in the episodes to come. Now, I invite you to begin the first chapter of our epic, with a kingdom that was once a regional power but was forgotten for many centuries, the Kingdom of Funan. Episode 1. Funan, the Forgotten Empire of the Mekong Delta, 1st to 7th centuries. 1.1 War, from conquest to collapse. The history of Funan, like many other ancient states, was written through warfare. From an initial political entity, Funan quickly demonstrated its ambitions. The period from the 3rd to the 5th century is considered its golden age, as the kingdom continuously expanded its territory through conquests. 3 From its center in the Mekong Delta, Funan's power spread, controlling a vast territory that included all of present-day Cambodia, southern Vietnam, and parts of Thailand, Laos, and the Malay Peninsula. 4 This expansion not only brought land and resources, but also helped Funan control key trade routes in the region, laying the foundation for the kingdom's economic prosperity. However, all power eventually wanes. The fatal threat to Funan came from one of its own vassals, Chinla. Originally a small state in the middle Mekong region, Chinla gradually grew stronger. In the 6th century, as Funan began to show signs of internal weakness, Chinla seized the opportunity. Chinla's attacks on Funan became increasingly fierce, culminating in the early 7th century when Chinla completely annexed Funan, ending the existence of what had been the most powerful empire in the region for the first 6 centuries of the Common Era. 3 The war between Funan and Chinla was not just a military conflict. It symbolized the transfer of power from a maritime trade-based empire to a continental agriculture-based power, paving the way for the rise of the later Khmer Empire. 1.2 Politics. The first foundations. Funan is recognized as the earliest organized state in ancient Southeast Asia. 7 For the first 2 centuries, its social organization was relatively simple. But from the 3rd century, along with territorial expansion, the political system was gradually perfected and became more complex. 3 At the head of the state was the king, who held supreme power in both secular and spiritual matters. Below the king was a system of officials organized into various ranks, assisting the king in governing the country. The existence of such an administrative apparatus shows a significant step up from previous tribal societies, allowing the state to manage a large territory and population more effectively. Funanese society was also clearly stratified, reflecting a complex social structure with a high degree of labor specialization. According to records, society was divided into 5 main classes: the nobility, members of the royal family and major clans; the clergy, those who held religious roles; merchants, the wealthy class from trade; artisans, producers of fine goods; and farmers, the largest labor force, creating the food foundation for society. 3 This division not only shows the development in social organization, but also indicates the influence of Indian social models, which were introduced along with religion and culture. 1.3 Economy. Golden Age of the OCEO port. Funan's economy was a brilliant model of success, harmoniously combining indigenous agriculture with international trade. On the fertile alluvial plains of the Mekong River, the people of Funan developed an advanced wet rice agriculture. They also raised livestock such as pigs and chickens, and exploited the abundant aquatic resources from the network of rivers and coastal areas. 3 However, the main pillar that created Funan's wealth and power was trade, especially maritime trade. The Funanese were skilled merchants. The economic heart of this empire was the port city of OCEO, located in what is now in Jiang Province. 2 OCEO's strategic location turned it into one of the busiest commercial and cultural centers in Southeast Asia at the time. Here, merchant ships from China, India, Malaya, and even as far as the Mediterranean, as evidenced by Roman coins found, docked to exchange goods. 3 Funan's handicraft industry was also highly developed to serve both domestic and export needs. Funanese artisans crafted exquisite products from pottery, glass, gold, silver, and precious stones, as well as smelting copper and forging iron to create production tools and weapons. 3 Funan's prosperity, therefore, came not only from selling local products, but also from its role as a commercial intermediary, connecting the great civilizations of the ancient world. OCEO was not just a port. It was Funan's gateway to the world, a confluence of goods, currency, and also cultural and religious ideas. 1.4 Culture. The Indian imprint on a new land. Economic wealth created conditions for a rich cultural and spiritual life in Funan, known collectively as the OCEO culture. 4 This culture was a unique blend of indigenous elements and strong external influences, especially from India. From the early centuries of the Common Era, Funan was quick to embrace the great religions from India: Hinduism and Buddhism. 3 Hindu deities such as Vishnu, Shiva, and the cult of the sun god became popular among the nobility and royalty. At the same time, Buddhism was also widely propagated. The adoption of these religions was not merely a matter of faith. They also played a crucial role in consolidating the king's power, providing an ideology and a clerical apparatus that helped legitimize and stabilize the social order. From Funan, these religions continued to spread to other parts of the region. Point 3. The influence of Indian culture is also clearly visible in architecture and sculpture. The art of carving statues of Hindu gods and Buddhas from stone and wood flourished, creating a distinct artistic style, often referred to as the Funan style. Point 3. Sculptures found at OCEO show a high level of technical skill and aesthetic sense, bearing characteristics of Indian art, while also displaying the unique creativity of local artists. In daily life, the Funanese people skillfully adapted to their riverine environment. They built spacious stilt houses made of wood with thatched roofs, an architectural style well suited to the hot, humid climate and flooded terrain. Point 3. To travel on the dense network of canals, they used boats and sampans. On land, horses, buffaloes, and oxen were used to pull carts. Point 3. All of this paints a vivid cultural picture of a flourishing riverine civilization. 1.5. Legacy and collapse. Although it collapsed over a millennium ago, the Kingdom of Funan left behind important legacies. The most obvious tangible legacy is the complex of archaeological sites belonging to the OCEO culture, widely distributed throughout southern Vietnam, especially in the OCEO, Ba the area, and Giang. Point 4. The excavated artifacts, from pottery, jewelry, and religious statues to foreign currencies, are precious pieces that help historians and archaeologists reconstruct a civilization that once existed. In terms of intangible heritage, Funan laid the groundwork for the early state model in Southeast Asia. They were pioneers in building an organized state beyond the tribal scale, combining wet rice agriculture with maritime trade, and selectively adopting foreign cultural religious elements to consolidate power and create an identity. This model paved the way and became a lesson for the successor empires that followed. However, why did such a powerful empire collapse? Researchers have proposed a combination of reasons. First, there were environmental changes. The hypothesis of sea level rise, with marine transgressions causing flooding and salinization, severely affected agricultural lands and residential areas. Changes in river currents and coastlines may also have diminished the role of port cities like OCEO.6. Second, internal weakness. Fierce succession disputes within the royal family caused the central court to become divided and lose its inherent strength. 6. As the center of power faltered, vassals began to rebel and secede. Finally, the decisive blow came from a military factor. Taking advantage of Funan's weakness, the vassal kingdom of Chinla continuously attacked and eventually completely annexed Funan in the early 7th century. 3. Funan can be seen as the first draft of an empire in mainland Southeast Asia. Its formation and development were an experiment in creating a large-scale state. Funan's successful model was built on two strong pillars. First, the rich wet rice agriculture of the Mekong Delta, and second, its role as an international maritime trade hub through the strategic port of OCEO. 3. This combination brought Funan extraordinary prosperity. However, this very dependence on these two pillars became its fatal weakness. When natural conditions changed, such as the rise in sea level that reduced land area and affected the location of Seaport 6, one of the two economic pillars was severely shaken. At the same time, when a continental vassal power, Chinla, whose strength was based on agriculture and control of human resources, had accumulated enough power and rose to challenge 3, Funan's political military pillar collapsed. Therefore, the disappearance of Funan was not a random event. It is a profound historical lesson, showing the fragility of early state models in the face of major environmental, economic, and political upheavals. The fall of Funan left a power vacuum that Chinla, the predecessor of the Khmer Empire, quickly filled. Chinla not only replaced Funan but also inherited and perfected the state model on the same land, but with a different, more continental focus. Funan, therefore, is not just a closed chapter of history, but also the foundation, the lesson for the more glorious chapters that would be written by its successor dynasties.